Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It, led by the one, the only, Fancy Lang. There you go, there you got it. Where's my coffee? Oh, it's up there, forget about it. Alright, let's get started. Chaf Bezim and Aleph. The top here, we're discussing yesterday, again, this discussion of Baal, Megas Gaiz, of Baal Ma'akar Akar. How does it work by Afaras and Nadarim, at least by Afaras and Naziris we're talking about? Nazir is a type of a nether. Even though the Gemara discussed this numerous times, Mesechus and Nadarim discussed this, it used a different lashon, Miklash Kalash and Megas Gaiz. We seemingly had an answer to the question from exactly the same Gemara the Gemara is going to bring over here. But this is the way of the Gemara. And I believe, Gemara's word written down, in Mukdam Muchar B'Torah, there's another thing which is earlier or later in the Torah. It's an ongoing discussion in the Talmud. It happens to be written down at a certain amount of time, but it could be this discussion happened before the other discussion. That's what I truly believe. Let's start. Chav Bezim off the top line. Tashma. Isha Shenadra Nazir of Nitmis. She took a neder, a Naziris, and she became Tameh. Apparently, it was within 24 hours. The Baal was made for the Naziris, even though she became Tmeya during that day. Mevia Chadza Of and Mevia Olas Of. The halacha is she brings for her Tuma, right? Normally, if you become Tameh as a Nazir or Nazira, so you bring a Chatas Of, Olas Of, and an Asham. She brings a Chatas Of, not Olas Of, and presumably not an Asham either. If you hold the way Afaras Nadarim or Naziras works, is the husband right now, he cuts it away right now. Taisi Namas Olas Of. He just blocked it right now, but she was a Nazira for the time when she became Tmeya. So she should have to bring not only the Chatzah, but the Olasov, and presumably the Asham also. So the words of Elamai Ma'akar Akar, what do you want to say? Really? No, the opposite is that he actually uprooted it Mikara. I explained, it doesn't mean he actually uprooted it, he blocked it, he blocked her words. When she took the Nazira, she weakened her words, Miklish Kalish, like he says in Melchizedek Darim. Chatzah not the Saisi. Even if you say Ma'akar Akar, it's not a proof because she shouldn't bring a Chadzov either, because then she didn't have any Naziros or a complete Naziros on herself. Lo Sais Yakadami, the Gemara says really she shouldn't bring the Chadzov. Really, Baal Ma'akar Akar, that's the truth. Like the Gemara already proved already on Daf Zayin Ches. Vahamani, who is the author of this brisa? Lezer Kapar, the son of Lezer Kapar Omer. Mata Malon Mashat Shechata Al Nefesh. The pasuk says that he brings korbanos tuma when he becomes tamei because he sinned on a nefesh. What did he do so wrong? What was his sin? Even though this pasuk is talking about a nazir who becomes tamei, which is an avera, the fact that it specifically says it over there, nazir tamei, and it adds the word shachat al nefesh, which is extra words over there. So therefore, it indicates that even a nazir tor, even a nazir who takes a nazir and he completes a betara, he still sinned. What's the Aveira, as our copper says? By actively taking upon yourself the zeros and prohibiting yourself from drinking alcohol, you're mitzvah yourself, you cause yourself pain. Nikra chota. He's called a chota. Velodorim kal v'chomer. Our copper learned something amazing from this. Nazir, all he did is prohibit alcohol. He's considered a sinner. Someone who takes a kindness upon himself, he forbids himself from eating all foods, certainly he's a big sinner. Now, I didn't explain this last time, but I'm going to focus even Ben Sion on this time, that apparently the Gemara at this point assumes from this brayso that Baal Ma'akar Akar, or Miklash Kalish, like he says in Melchizedek Darim, he weakened the neder, B'Shas Amira, there was no Kabbalah Zira, she's not going to get Malchus for it. But according to Ezra Kapper, she brings the Chatzah off. Why? Because she's a sinner. If there's no Naziros at all, so technically she was not mitzvah atzma and why you can't bring a korban? You can't bring a korban. You're bringing the korban chatas oaf. She's going to bring them in his beach in the Beis Hamikdash. You can't bring chulin la'azara. So it must be there's some status of Naziros that she still has upon her, even though he revoked her Naziros. She's not a chefsa of Isser. She probably doesn't have a shvua of Isser. An Isser, because you get Malchus otherwise. For sure, you get Malchus. So what type of Nazira is she? If you hold Bama Akar or Miklish Kalish, what type of Nazira is she that according to Elishak Kapar, she still brings the Chatzah, which is a korban? We'll explain that more in Yid Ben Sion. So the Gemara hasn't resolved this apparently, even though the Gemara did resolve it many times. Tashma, The Tanya Behedya, a different Bryce, says explicitly, Isha Shanajra Nazir. She took a Nazir. So Shama Chaverta Amravani. Her friend heard her taking Nazirs, and she added within Toka de Libra, she said, Vani, I also want to be a Nazir. But Baila Shel Arishona, the husband of the first woman, came Mehefer, and he was Mehefer during the 24 hours, her Nazirs. He mutar is a Chaverta Asura. His wife is mutar. She's not a Nazira, but her friend is Asura. Shamira Balamikas guy is. So you see from here that the husband cuts it away now. If he would have cut away retroactively, he would have blocked her Amira. So then when her friend said Vani, she's not attached to your Nazir to anything, so she should also be mutaris. So you see Balamikas guys, even the Gemara proved from the previous Bryce, Me Akar Akar, the Gemara seems to Shmamina. You seeing a proof. Balamikas guys. So the problem is, we just said Ma'akar, and now we're proving Megas Gaias. Which one is it? We'll talk more about that, explain that in Iyad Ben Sion. Rabbi Shimon ben Omer, Imam Allah Harini Kamosech, which the Brisa continues, the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, which is not necessarily arguing on the first opinion. Rabbi Shimon says, if she responded to the first one woman says Harini Nazira, and her friend said Harini Kamoscha, Amar Allah Harini Kamoscha Hashem Mutaros. In that case, when the Baal of the first one, the husband of the first one, is made for the Naziros, even if you hold Megas Gaias, for some reason, both of them will be Muteres in that case. The previous discussion was really the question of Rami Brachama. The Bai Rami Brachama. This is actually, if you remember, Mesechus Nedarim, Daf It Aleph. We had this discussion. Bai Rami Brachama, or Daf It Beis, I'm not sure. Harei Alai Kibasar Zevach Shlamim. He says this piece of meat is usher to me like the meat of Zivchei Shlamim. And the Gemara says he has a piece of Zivchei Shlamim in front of him. So he's doing Hatzfasa, right? One of the things to take another to compare it to Hektish. Mao, Kimitas Inish, Bikarak Mitzvahs. Is he comparing the Heter piece of meat to the Basar Zivchei Shlamim before Zrikas Adam, where it was Kadshim, right? And therefore he's Hatzfasa to Hektish, and it's a Neder. Oh, no, but it's not a Matvis. Maybe he's being Matvis, he's connecting it to the present state after Zrikas Dam. Basar Zivchei Shlamim, he happens to be in front of you now because you threw the blood on the Mizbeach, and therefore you offered on the Mizbeach a korban, and part of the korban is eaten. The Garda Shlam is eaten by Yisraelim. So the Gemara says that's the same question over here, where a woman says, a Bryce says she's a Nazira. Her friend attaches herself to the Naziris. The husband's Mayfair, right? Mayfair, the Naziris of the first one, of the first lady. So according to the Brysa, right, she is Mutaris, but her friend is Asura. So therefore, it's the same question over here. Ram Racham would say the same question. The second lady, when she's attaching herself to the first lady, is she attaching herself to the beginning when she became, right, where her husband hadn't been made for the Naziris yet? Or is she attaching to the end where her husband was made for the Naziris and she shouldn't become a Nazira? It would seem to indicate from the Bryce that she's attaching herself to the beginning, right? And that's why she's in Nazir. The Gemara says, "Midavi Hasam came on the Amar Harei like Vasser Devashlamim. Afagav Lachash Nizrak Damo Mati Achalai B'chutz Mikdash Kadosh." You can't compare the two cases. Vasser Devchei Shlamim, even though after Zrikas Dam, right, it's mutter for Yisrael to eat, it's still a certain kedusha because Zivchei Shlamim, even though they can be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim, they can only be eaten in Yerushalayim, and they can only be eaten for a day, right? Yom V'Layla, or some Shlamim for 2 days and 1 night. So it has kedusha. If you're going to say by the woman, right, she's attaching herself not just to the beginning, but even to the end after afara, right? That's completely mutter, right? Zivchei Shlamim, it's a question. Rabbi Rachman had a question because maybe, right, a person's das. He's for sure, right, being matvis to kedusha, right? But is he matvis to complete kedusha before the zrikas dam, or partial kedusha after? Partial kedusha happens to be mutter over there, so there for sure he's connecting to something of kedusha. Over here, there's no havamina to say that she's gonna connect herself to after the hafara, because then she's completely mutaris, the first lady. Some say some say no. That brisa is exactly the shayla Amar Racham, and presumably you answer from that brisa. The answer Amar Racham be kara kamatvis. Amar la harein nazira beikvech. The Gemara says she said. One woman said she's a Nazira, and her friend said, I am a Nazira following you. I'm following your footsteps, right? If you want to subscribe to my channel, in Hebrew it's called La'akov Acharai, to follow after me. Really, in Twitter you follow after someone. in YouTube, you subscribe. There's no real way of saying subscribe. You say la'akov acharai. Hareini Nazir be'ikvech. So she says, I am a Nazir in your footsteps. Mao hareini be'ikvech be'kula milsa v'sharya. Right? In the aforementioned case, right, where her husband, she connected herself, she said vani. Instead of saying vani, she said hareini be'ikvayach. And then the husband, the first one was matir, was made for the Nazirah, so the first lady. Be'kula milsa v'sharya. She's attaching herself to the complete idea of Nazirus. And therefore her husband was made for the Naziris at some point, so she's mutar. So then kamikmi delay for labai lavasir. Maybe she had in mind only before her husband is made for Nazir. So even though the husband is made for the Naziris, she's going to be asura, like the Raya says. Tashma. Isha shenadra v'nazir shama bailav amar v'ani. She took a Naziris, her husband said, I also. The husband takes a Nazir, becomes a Nazir. Ain't no yachal hafer. He can't be made for his wife's Naziris. Like we explained, because by being made for his wife's Naziris, he's also being made for or matir his Naziris, and you can't be made for or matir your own neder. But still telling when the woman says, I'm following after you, I'm following your footsteps, she's attaching herself to the original Naziris. Leifer la ledida, velokim didei. Right? Here also, when he says vani, he's only attaching herself to the original part before the hafara, so you can make for her Naziras, and he'll attach himself, right? He's attaching himself, and his will remain in place, right? His will remain in place, right? Because he's always, right? He's attached to the ikar of her Naziras, and she took the Naziras, but he's made for her presently, like we said, Mega's guys. He's presently blocks the Naziras right now. And his Nazirus was be'ikar when she was asura, so therefore it remains in place. There's no problem. It must be that when a person is connecting himself vani or hareini be'ikvayach, he's connecting himself to the entire Nazirus, and that includes when she becomes muteris. And therefore he can't be made. And that's only because it's the husband, because he can't be matir or made for his own neder, for his own Nazirus. But a woman who's hareini be'ikvayach, she's muteris also, right? Because you say she follows in her footsteps, so kula milsa, the entire thing. Really, I'll tell you, even when she's already mikvayach, she's only attaching herself to the ikar, the beginning. The explanation in our Mishnah, when he says vani, the reason he can be made for is not because he is accepting Nazirus upon himself. When he says vani, like we suggested before in the Gemara, he's being makayim her Nazirus, right? He's affirming the Nazirus. Therefore, if he wants to be made for Nazirus, he has to first be matir his akama, his affirmation, and then be made for her Nazirus. That's why. It's not because he's accepting Nazirus upon himself, it's because he's makayim the Nazirus. The Gemara suggested this earlier. Harini Nazir v'at v'amra amein. The Mishnah continues. He says, I'm a Nazir, v'at, and you, basically asking my wife, you want to be a Nazir, v'amra amein. She said amein, basically, I'm going to be a Nazira. Mayfair et shalav shlo kayim. You can make for her Nazirus, but his not, right? It makes sense. Her, because she's dependent on him, right? If he's made for her Nazirus, it's not matter his own Nazirus. For a minhu, the Brisa, which seems to contradict this, her any Nazir. He says, I'm a Nazir, va'at, and you. Va'amra amen. She said, amen. Shneim asur, they're both asur. V'im lav, shneim mutar. If she didn't say amen, they're both mutar. Nishachala nidra b'nidra. Here, right, it says shneim asur, right? Sounds like he can't be made for her Nazirus. Our Mishnah said he can be made for her Nazirus. I'm Rav Yehuda, Tani made for Shalav Shlokiyim. Now you have to change around the words in this brisa. Technically, he could be made for her Nazirus, and his stays in place. Abaye Amar, Abaye is a different answer. I feel the Tema Knekatani brisa. Maybe the words of the brisa are exact, are they correct? Could go in the Gamar law, Harini Nazir Va'at. What was the exact situation? He said, I'm a Nazir. Va'at. And you also, the Katali Nidro Benidra, like the Brisa says, right? He's saying, I'm a Nazir, basically on condition that you also become a Nazir. And then she says, Amen. So therefore, if he's Mata, they're both, he's Tala Nidro Benidra, he's saying, I'm only becoming a Nazir if you become a Nazira. And she just says, Amen, so she becomes a Nazira. So his Naziros is dependent on her Naziros. He's made for her Naziros, then automatically his is going to be Mufar, and you can't do that. Masdis in the top of Kimon and Aleph, can go into Amar La Harini Nazir Va'at Mai. Our Mishnah is talking about it says va'at, but really it says va'at mai. It means he's saying va'at. It doesn't have to mean that he's saying va'at mai. It can be like the way he's saying it. He's saying va'at, and what about you, right? If he says already Nazir va'at, I'm a Nazir and you together, which is a main, so therefore they're dependent on each other. But if she says, already Nazir, I'm a Nazir. Va'at, what do you like? And he says it like questioning va'at, what do you think? Va'at mai. So therefore, they're not dependent. His Nazir is not dependent on her accepting a Nazir. They're independent Nazir. So therefore, you also want to be a Nazir? And she says, yeah. So her Nazir is not, his Nazir is not dependent on her Nazir. So therefore, he can make for hers, and his remains in place because he's not being matter or made for his own neder, his own Naziris. That's the conclusion of today's share. Stay tuned for Ian with Ben Sion, where we talk about what happens. It's very confusing. The Gemara in many places seems to say ma'akar akir with our first Nadarim, our first Naziris. And here the Gemara on Chav Beis Manalef on the bottom to say Megas Gaias seems to be the conclusion of the Gemara. And secondly, how does it work? Even if there's a kapar, if you say ma'akar akir, why do you bring a korban chatas? Maybe chul zara. If there's no Naziris, you can't bring a korban chatas because you're tzir asman again. You did a bad thing. You have a bad midos. You cause pain to yourself. It's not justification for bringing a korban. We'll explain in a more analytical way how to understand the explanation of me'akar akar. Megas guy is basically the concept of Varas Nadarim. We'll talk more about that. Ian Ben Sion coming up next.